So we're in the 5th chapter now of Ketubot. We've gone through 4 preliminary chapters about a whole range of subjects, and now we're actually getting more seriously into the subject matter of the Ketubah itself. And the chapter begins, Afal pi shamru b'tulak matayim ve'almana maneh. Even though they said, and the Mishnah here means kind of they said, well, the sages said, even though they said a virgin collects 200 and a widow 1 maneh. So that's a virgin collects 200 zuz and a widow 100 zuz in her ketubah. Imrat salah hosif afilu me'amaneh yosif. If he wanted to add even 100 maneh, that's 10,000 zuz, 100 zuz. Even he wants to put in 10,000 zuz, he may. In other words, the possibility of embarrassing a husband who can't afford to add that amount of money to the ketubah is somehow, maybe it doesn't enter the sages' reckoning, or maybe, they do enter it into their reckoning, but they dismiss it. The point is that it is possible. There's no limit. There's no limit on the sum you can add to the ketubah. Nit almanah or nit garsha. So she's widowed or divorced. So this is where the ketubah money becomes absolutely liable. It's written in the ketubah, but it has to be paid out if she's widowed or if she's divorced. So she's widowed or divorced. So she's widowed or divorced, and this is either after betrothal or after marriage. So we need to keep in mind that betrothal and marriage could have been a long time, so it could be a long way apart, 1 year, 2, we'll see. It could be more than a year between betrothal and marriage. But the point is that once the betrothal has taken place, she's committed. She can't be released without a get. Once she's released with a get, she has the status of a divorced woman. Under those circumstances, the sages are saying, look, doesn't matter if she was never properly married. If she was betrothed and then divorced, she gets the full amount. There's no quibbling. And Rabbi Elazar ben Azari is going to disagree. Rabbi Elazar ben Azari Omer, Mina nisuin govet hakol mina erusin b'tula gover masai v'almona maneh. Rabbi Elazar ben Azari is going to disagree. He says, look, from marriage, from the point of when after she goes under the chuppah, if he divorces her or if he dies, she gets the total amount up to 10,000 zuz. But if he betroths her and then dies or divorces her, a virgin only gets the minimum amount, the minimal amount of the ketubah, which is 200 zuz for a virgin and a maneh, 100 zuz for a widow. And he actually has he has an argumentation. He says, because he only wrote that because he intended to marry her. In other words, there's an implied condition in the ketubah when he writes that additional amount that he's going to marry. And so Rabbi Elazar ben Azari says, no. There's an implied condition when he adds in the extra 10,000 zuz that's on condition he marries her. And actually, the halacha doesn't go according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azari. But Rabbi Yehuda is going to discuss, and Rabbi Yehuda is going to discuss different ways of, if you like, managing down the amount in the ketubah. So we've dealt with managing up. Can we, does the sum drop if she's only betrothed? Seems not. What if we do a little bit of a legal fiction? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Imrat Sakotevli V'tula Shtar Shel Matayim, V'hi Kotevet Lo Shetit Shenit Kabalti Mimach Maneh. So Rabbi Yehuda says, if he wishes, he can write for a virgin a document for 200 zuz. That's the normal amount. That's the minimum prescribed amount. But then she writes him a document that says, I've received a maneh from you i.e., I've received 100 zuz from you. What does this mean? This means that if she gets divorced or if he dies, she's already had 100 zuz from her 200, so she only gets half the sum of the ketubah. Now, there's no suggestion in the Mishnah that she actually did receive the 100 zuz, the money. This is a legal fiction to allow the man to write a ketubah that looks like it's got the right amount on it, and for her to give him a document that effectively devalues that ketubah by 50%. And it feels like this is done with her consent. Well, why would she consent? Well, perhaps he's a poor guy. I mean, perhaps he can't afford 200 zuz. So maybe Rabbi Yehuda is trying to offer the possibility for a person who can't afford a ketubah of 200 zuz to get married on a ketubah of only 100 zuz, albeit with the consent of the bride. And it would go the same, by the way, if she were a widow. So the Mishnah continues. Maybe he writes, maybe for a widow he writes a maneh, that's 100 zuz, and she writes, I've received from you 50 zuz, i.e., if you die or if I'm divorced, I'm only due another 50. I'm not due the 400. So she consents to having her ketubah reduced. And the halakha goes according to Rabbi Meir, by the way. Rabbi Meir says, Rabbi Meir Omer, Kol hapochei livtula mimatayim u'almana mimaneh harezo bilat znut. Rabbi Meir, he's objecting very strongly. He says, giving a virgin less than 200 zuz or a widow less than a maneh is bilat zut, is basically promiscuous sex. He says you can't do that. You need to treat marriage seriously, and part of that is a financial commitment. And it's absolutely forbidden to reduce the size of the financial commitment, even with the consent of both parties. Even with the consent of both parties, it's absolutely forbidden. Now, what if? So that's the structure of the ketubah. At what point are the obligations of the husband going to begin? And we've touched on the fact that there may be time between betrothal and marriage. And the Mishnah goes on to say, not nimli v'tulah shnei masach chodesh mishitavala habal. A virgin is given 12 months from when the husband claimed her. So it feels like betrothal could be long time before marriage. But at a certain point after betrothal, the husband has to show up and say, okay, now it's time to get married. And at this point, she has 12 months latitude to prepare herself. And it's omnidirectional. Misha Kashem shenotnim la'isha kach notnim la'ish lefarnes et atzmo. Just as it is given to the woman, so it's given to the man to prepare himself. So they both get a year, essentially, to get ready for the wedding. Ula almana shloshim yom, and for a widow, 30 days. Somehow, for a widow, seems like it's much easier to get ready for a wedding than for someone who's never been married before. Maybe we can recognize the psychology even today. Higia zmanam velo nisu, o shemetu ba'alehen, ochlot mishelo ve'ochlot bitruma. So if their time has come, so that the 12 months have expired now, and they haven't got married, or maybe the husband's dead. I mean, maybe so much time has expired, this husband's not alive anymore. I mean, okay, life expectancy was shorter in the time of the Mishnah, and there was more uncertainty, I think, than there is today. So what happens? Ochlot mishelo ve'ochlot bitruma. So at that point, he has to support her. Even if he hasn't married her, he's betrothed her. And 12 months has passed from the time he said, okay, we're going to get married. So he has to support her from his possessions. And by the way, if he's a Kohen, she can now eat truma. She's considered effectively part of his house. Rabbi Tarfon Omer not nimla hakol bi truma. Rabbi Tarfon says she can be essentially maintained completely in truma. So, and of course, this is good for the man because truma is cheaper than regular food, right? Not everybody can eat truma. Truma will always trade at a lower price in the market than regular food because not everybody can eat it. So, and Rabbi Tarfon says, and by the way, he's a priest, Rabbi Tarfon. So maybe he's talking his own book there. Rabbi Tarfon says the man can completely maintain it in truma. And there are implications, by the way, because when she's niddah, or if she's impure, she can't eat truma. So at some point, she will have to, I mean, she needs ordinary food as well. I mean, maybe she could sell the truma in the market and buy ordinary food. But of course, she's going to sell the truma for less. She's going to sell the truma at a lower price than the price she's going to pay for ordinary food, because truma trades cheaper in the market. So, but anyway, Rabbi Tarfon says, okay, he can maintain it completely in truma. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Machza chulin u'machza truma. Rabbi Akiva says half chulin and half truma. You have to give her at least half her maintenance in ordinary food. I mean, maybe, you know, it's not just a question of her being niddah. Maybe she needs to maintain other members of her family who can't eat truma. There might be many reasons why she needs maintenance in chulin as well as in truma. And so that's where Rabbi Akiva pauses. And we've seen before in the Mishnah this tension, if you like, between the rabbis and the Kohanim. And sometimes that tension is evidenced in tension between an ancient opinion that seems to go from the time of the Beit Mikdash, between an ancient opinion in favor of the Kohanim and a newer opinion that seems to tend towards the rabbis. And you know, it's very interesting that our Mishnah seems to show this pattern. Rabbi Tarfon, as a youth, remembered the temple service. He's just on the crossover point between, if you like, before and after the destruction, whereas Rabbi Akiva is definitively the generation of the students of Yochanan ben Zakkai. He's after the destruction. So we can see perhaps why Rabbi Akiva will be less sympathetic to the Kohanim than Rabbi Tarfon.